Good morning. I'm the Reverend Julie Ann Lepp. It is a pleasure to be with you today. And we are celebrating community ministry with our members. And this happens in hospitals, hospices, prisons, college campuses, the military, police departments, educators, musicians, therapists. Good morning. I'm the Reverend Julie. I have to learn to turn off my sound. We continue to reach out with our UU values for social justice as activists and leaders, doing the hard work of bringing UU principles to serving the wider world. Community Ministry Sunday is an opportunity to support the work of those who actively engage in building the world that we want to live in. And what's really interesting is this service also honors 4 naval chaplains of different faiths who worked together to save lives and sacrifice their own in 1943 as the SS Dorchester went down under Nazi fire. Today we will explore the tipping point whereby the values we affirm with the UUA 7 Principles may lead us to a just, healed, and transformed world. I invite you to settle in with these opening words. It is not by chance that you arrived here today. Perhaps you have been looking for something larger than yourself. Inside of you, there is a yearning, a calling, a hope for more, a desire for a place of belonging and caring. Through your struggles, someone nurtured you into being, instilled a belief of shared purpose, a common but precious resource that belongs to all of us that we share. And so here in this beloved community, we are a people that does not put fences around love, a community that holds its arms wide to the possibilities of love, a heart home to nourish your soul and share your gifts. And today is Bring a Friend Sunday, so if you are on Facebook, I invite you to share this out. We love having visitors, and we want to welcome you to worship and welcome you home. Come, let us worship together.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way. On the road from greed to giving, love will guide us through the hot night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak for thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way. On the road from greed to giving, love will guide us through the hot night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak for thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way. On the road from greed to giving, love will guide us through the hot night. On the road from greed to giving, love will guide us through the hot night.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Quam. I'm with the UUC Pledge Committee. I'm the co-chair along with Jim Hepner, and I'm glad everyone could join us here this morning. I kind of wanted to give everyone here an update with our pledge drive. And for those of you who may not be familiar with our pledge drive, it basically runs from July 1st of each year till June 30th of the following year. So our pledge drive for this year would go from July 1st, 2021 to June 30th of 2022. Our pledge goal that we set for this year was $253,890. And our pledges that came in that were counted up through Saturday evening, our current pledges raised so far are $146,000. I'm sorry, $146,514. That puts us at about 57.7% of our pledge goal. So we are a little bit short at this time. It's about 72 units that came in. I'd like to recommend, if you haven't pledged already, you can certainly pledge. We've made that very convenient. You can go to our UUC website, and there's a link where you can make your pledge online. Or if you'd like, you can also mail in your pledge that can certainly be done that way. So again, if you haven't pledged, the pledge drive actually does end tomorrow, March 1st, but we obviously will continue to keep receiving pledges. So we're glad that everybody that has pledged so far, and if you're able to pledge, we certainly encourage that. So anyways, at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Pam Marr with Life of the Community. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, my name is Pamela Marr, and I'm the board liaison with the Social Responsibility Committee, the Worship Committee, and the Music Committee. I'm also on the Safety Committee. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation. We are a religious community who commit ourselves to diversity. We hope to nourish human differences, those of gender, race, age, ability, sexual orientation, political views, culture, class, and religious belief. Welcome to all who treasure freedom of conscience and the search for truth. We promise to do our best to provide you a spiritual home. We extend a special welcome to our visitors today. We hope you will follow our UUC Facebook page and stay tuned for other events such as Wonderful Wednesdays and Sunday morning meditation. There are religious exploration classes for adults and small groups for support and interest, like book club. Also, families can follow our UUC Religious Exploration Facebook page. There are religious exploration classes for 4K through 9th grade and youth group every Wednesday online for middle school and high school. We are so glad you joined us today.
Please join me in saying the words for lighting the chalice, the words of our Margaret Wheatley. There is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. I'd also like to share with you a reading by Wayne Mueller. It's from The Legacy of the Heart, The Spiritual Advantages of a Painful Childhood. The practice of loving kindness must find its root deep within us. The story is told of Mohandas, also known as by the honorific Mahatma Gandhi, once settled in a village and at once began serving the needs of the villagers who lived there. A friend inquired if Gandhi's objectives in serving the poor were purely humanitarian. Gandhi replied, "Not at all. I am here to serve no one else but myself, to find my own self-realization through the service of these village folk." As Gandhi wisely points out, even as we serve others, we are working on ourselves. Every act, every word, Every gesture of genuine compassion naturally nourishes our own hearts as well. It's not a question of who is healed first. When we attend to ourselves with compassion and mercy, more healing is made available for others. And when we serve others with an open and generous heart, great healing comes to us.
Hi, I am Sarah Meyer and I have Isabel with me. And today we have a reading called Nurture This Precious Light by Naomi King. How shall we begin to live out our free faith?
Nurture this precious light.
When we do, we are beacons of freedom, creating a safe place to rest, explore, and innovate.
Nurture this precious light.
How we keep this lamp of truth and justice affects how and whether we are transforming inequity through witness and action.
Nurture this precious light.
As we nurture this precious light together, we become a light of hope, turning isolation into community.
Anguish into peace. Sorrow into joy.
Nurture this precious light.
As we do, our faith burns a steady flame of innovation, banishing illusion, creating a new and renewing way together.
Nurture this precious light.
With our living connections, with our glowing stories, with our flame of freedom, moving hand to hand, we
Nurture this precious light. Together we turn this world from bleak to bright. One flame, one fire, one light at a time.
One flame, one fire at a time. And that's what we're all doing, right? We're trying to reach out and share the light. So this is the time in our service where we share our joys and concerns. If you have a joy or concern that you would like to share in the chat, I will share it here in our time together and light a candle. If you're attending with us in Zoom, you will also get a chance to share it in person if you like, with your own words. I would like to light a candle for Alan Jackson and Carol Johnson, who are both in hospice, and we are continuing to send cards and good thoughts and love to them. Sue shares that her son Mark is thankful for all the cards, stickers, jokes, and wishes and small gifts that people sent him. He broke his arm, and we hope that his healing continues. We light this candle for him. Light a candle for Deb, who has concern for her cousin Donna, who lost her 21-year-old daughter earlier this month. We light a candle for her. Tracy shares that her brother is recovering from an aneurysm and making great progress. We light this candle of hope for him. Alyssa Warner shares that she has a concern about possibly having to have knee surgery soon, and it is a joy to be part of this community. Alyssa, we're sending you lots of love and hope. Going to light this final candle for all the joys and concerns too tender to escape the folds of our hearts. If you'll please join me with the words for closing our joys and concerns. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant to seek the truth and love, this is our great covenant to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and love, and to help one another. And lastly, just also want to share that Marcia Jacobs attended a memorial service for a member of the UUFN Fellowship. We hold all of your joys and concerns in our hearts. Namaste and blessed be. And next we will move to Molly Larson, who will be sharing her reflection.
Hi everyone, my name is Molly. So I'm the Young Adult Liaison on the UU board, and I work at UW Eau Claire on the Student Office of Sustainability. So I'm going to start with an excerpt from the book The Nature Fix by Florence Williams. The Biophilia Hypothesis posits that peaceful or nurturing elements of nature helped us regain equanimity, cognitive clarity, empathy, and hope. When love, laughter, and music weren't around, there was always a sunset. The humans who were most attuned to the cues of nature were the ones who survived to pass on those traits. So this is a hypothesis that tries to explain why humans are inherently drawn to nature and why being outside lowers stress and makes us physically and mentally healthier. Scientific studies have linked being outside with better physical health, even if you don't partake in physical activity while you're outside. And it has also been linked to lower rates of depression and higher levels of creativity and general well-being. So I've always been interested in environmentalism, even at a young age. I think people my age are uniquely situated in history in the sense that the climate crisis has been a presence throughout our childhoods and young adult lives. So a lot of the predictions are very dire, but they will affect people my age and people younger than me the most. And this is why I'm drawn to the work I do. So to me, environmentalism is important because people need to find ways to coexist with the rest of the ecological system. Western civilization has had a tendency to separate ourselves from nature and set ourselves above it in a hierarchy, but truly we are part of it, and everything we do affects the ecosystem and the world around us. And for a long time, Westerners have done our best to ignore that. So as far as the work I do personally, I am the education intern for the UW Eau Claire Student Office of Sustainability. So most of my job includes researching information for students to be more sustainable and posting it on our social media. This year has been a little weird because of the pandemic. So we usually have a bunch of events in April for Earth Month, but we have to do everything online this year. So I'm organizing all of our Earth Month activities to be on an online format, which, as we all know, is always a little weird. I've also worked with the Jonah Environmental Task Force, and up until recently, I was part of the Sustainable Lawns Group, which has helped to disseminate information about how to have an organic and environmentally friendly lawn. So here's another quote from the Florence Williams book I referenced earlier. She asked a man for advice about how to include more nature in everyday life. And he responded, "If you have time for a vacation, don't go to a city, go to a natural area. Visit a park at least once a week. Gardening is good. On urban walks, try to walk under trees, not across fields. Go to a quiet place near water is also good." And we're really lucky to live in Eau Claire, where we have a lot of green spaces and natural areas, a lot of rivers. And I highly recommend this book, The Nature Fix by Florence Williams, for tips on how to incorporate more natural and green spaces into your everyday life.
Voices, not Good morning. I was thinking about what to talk about. The quote, which I guess is from Confucius, kept coming to mind, which is, choose a job you love and you'll never have to work a day in your life. I definitely feel like I work, but I am incredibly honored and lucky to be a psychologist, and I absolutely adore what I do. I get to genuinely live out and cultivate the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism all day long. It is such an honor to share people's lives as deeply and happily long-term often as I get to. So thinking about how to share that, 2 things came to mind. One was kind of going through the principles and thinking about how they actually apply to what I do. I thought that was going to get a little old pretty quickly, but I'll go through a couple because I think, especially since this is a service where there might be some guests and friends, actually really articulating some of those principles might be helpful. So the first principle is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And I think that's kind of my core mission, is really helping people to enhance and cultivate their sense of hope and peace and self-worth and self-esteem and connection with others. I think all of those things are really sort of the cornerstones of the work I do. The second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. You know, that's also something I hold incredibly dear and spend a lot of time working on, is both one-on-one, but then in the wider community, trying to really help and cultivate and nourish diverse relationships and respect and equity in relationships and even within sort of larger institutions. So I could go one by one through all of these, but interestingly, as I was thinking about this also, I was kind of thinking about how I got to know that this was the right work for me. And I have to take this little moment to give a nod once again to my grandfather. Julie mentioned the Dorchester, SS Dorchester sinking in 1943. And actually the very next year in 1944, my grandfather was ordained as a Unitarian minister in Boston. And I grew up, hopefully you can tell, I wasn't there for that moment, but the rest of my growing up years with him is such an incredibly important part of my life and sort of the shaping of who I believe I am now, and certainly shaping my career. I got to see him working with his parishioners, supporting them, celebrating them, guiding and consoling them. The love he shared with them clearly reflected in the sense of connection and love that they shared back with him. It reminds me of what Dawn was reading first thing today. Sorry for my shuffling of papers here. At the end of Dawn's reading, he said, "When we serve others with an open and generous heart, great healing comes to us." And I saw that daily with my grandfather and in his work. And I think there was always a piece of me that wanted to find a kind of job that I could do where I felt that way. And I really do. Couple of just specific interesting parallels I thought about as I continued thinking in this line. I don't know how much people know about race relations and the state of Boston in the 50s, 60s, 70s. You know, one token unfortunate piece of their history is that the Red Sox were the last baseball team to integrate. They didn't integrate until 1959, which was 12 years later, after Jackie Robinson was able to play. But it didn't just stay there. It was Protestants and Catholics, and there's just a lot there. And my grandfather was literally in the trenches, in the cities, at the tables, trying to help work with people to bring folks together. But then he also did it on an individual basis. And I remember many times he would be taking off on a Saturday, not available because he was going to do a wedding for a couple that was a white woman and a Black man, or actually back in those days, sometimes it was a Catholic and a Protestant who wouldn't be able to be married in a church and rejected by their communities. Many Jewish weddings he was part of, if not the minister, he was one of the clergy there. And that extended as I grew older to one of the people who was willing and excited to do christenings for a gay couple who got to adopt a child. And funeral services. You know, he really knew the people and cared about the people greatly. And I love that I can do that from my perspective, in this room, but also in people's lives, really hoping to share some of that. I think one other thing I guess I would share too is that I love that he was such a gentle soul, thinking sort of back to what Molly talked about. I remember a number of times in college, he called me in his 70s to tell me about a huge turtle that came up to the orchard that they had retired on, or a sunset that brought him to tears. He retired, quote unquote, retired at 66 to an 80-acre apple orchard and quickly turned it into a family opportunity with Pick Your Own and a petting zoo. And his mission was to bring families together, even in his retirement. And it's what lit him up as well as shared so much joy with others. So when he was 78, he was finally escorted off a board of trustees for a group he had worked on forever. But there was a really wonderful gathering that we had. And happily, we have a copy of the remarks he gave. And so I was looking at those recently, and I just wanted to close with a quote from something he actually said, and I wish I could have said it this well, but it's really sort of the way I feel as well. So he said, "If I were to make a short list of my gratitude to others at this time, it would include the people in the churches I served, in nearly every condition and circumstance, sharing their births and deaths, hopes and fears, joys and sorrows, successes and disappointments, as I tried in some small measure to make their lives a little better and more meaningful. The longer I live, the more important it seems to me for all of us to be engaged in some form of human service. To find real satisfaction and true peace of mind, we have to recognize at least a few of the endless opportunities to fulfill our obligation to life by tangibly reaching out to others." So thanks for listening, and take good care.
So earlier I mentioned the Four Chaplains, and I'm going to share that story with you. If you haven't heard it before, it touches the heart. It was dark and cold in the early mornings of February 1943. An elderly coastal liner, the Dorchester, had been pressed into service as an Army troop ship. She was making her way slowly through the frigid waters of the North Atlantic towards Greenland. She was carrying 904 men, many of whom were new recruits. Because they were in submarine-infested waters, the captain had directed the men to keep on life jackets at all times. During the uncomfortable and difficult passage, the four Army chaplains on board worked tirelessly to maintain everyone's morale. Chaplain George Fox was Methodist. Chaplain Alexander Good was a Jewish rabbi. Chaplain Clark Poling was Dutch Reformed. And Chaplain John Washington was a Catholic priest. At 12:55 on February 3rd, the Dorchester was caught in the crosshairs of a U-456. One torpedo was launched and slammed into the Dorchester at midships. The wound was mortal. The ship began taking on water and listing starboard. In the ferment of struggling men, there came a fragment of hope and strength. These four chaplains led the men calmly to the lifeboats, distributing life jackets, and coaxed men frozen in fear over the side of the ship. In the midst of the men crying, pleading, praying, swearing, and dying, these four preached courage. And when all the life jackets were gone, each took off and gave it to a soldier. As the deck on the ship started to sink, the four chaplains, with arms linked, began to pray. Those men that could drew close. There were no more outcries, no panic, just words in Latin, Hebrew, and English, addressing to the same holy, the same sacred, the same God. One survivor recalls, "It was the finest thing I have ever seen or hope to see this side of heaven." Well over half a century later, the legend of the Four Chaplains speaks something deep in our hearts. For Father Washington didn't call out for Catholics when he handed out life jackets. nor rabbi good for a Jew. They gave them to the next soldier in line, and then stood shoulder to shoulder in mutual supporting faith. This is the ideal of humanity. This is what we want in America and in the world. This is what the Four Chaplains gave us. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm David Hirsch. For those of you who don't know, I'm an obstetrician gynecologist at Marshall Clinic. And let me click on this thing. This morning, I'd like to tell a story I have told many times in interviews to curious students, friends, and patients, to anyone who will listen, frankly, but from a different perspective than the one from which I normally tell it. In 2003, Tracy and I and young Timothy were living in Richmond, Virginia. Tracy worked at a plant store, and I was a software engineer with SunTrust Bank. As a self-taught software guy working in an unstable industry, I thought it a good idea to get some formal training in computer science, and therefore enrolled at Virginia Commonwealth University. I took a couple of classes that I had really struggled with in my first go-round with college as an 18-year-old, and these turned out to be quite easy in my 30s. Merriam-Webster defines a calling as a strong inner impulse toward a particular course of action, especially when accompanied by conviction of divine influence. Now, the second definition reads, the characteristic cry of a female cat in heat, but I don't think that really applies here. What does apply is the sense that a person's calling is what one is meant to do, that there is really only one path in life that will maximize one's potential for good. Is medicine a calling? As a Unitarian Universalist, I believe that the divine is in each of us. Most of the people I know in medicine got there out of a strong desire to reach their fellow humans in ways not available in most careers. We have the incredible privilege to participate in some of life's most significant events, to comfort and heal people in sickness, to help bring new lives into the world, that's me, and help ease those passing beyond, also sometimes me. Although we focus on the affairs of the body, the best medical providers always seek to integrate spiritual meaning into our work. I had always felt a calling for medicine, but my struggles in college had essentially eliminated the option of pursuing that field. But now, here I was in my mid-30s, rededicated to education, but in a career that I had drifted into, having started by managing a Kinko's copy shop and then teaching myself network engineering and tech support prior to teaching myself software development. I wondered if the calling I felt as a teenager was still there. I also wanted to take up the paddle of my life's canoe and actually pick a destination rather than drifting on the currents. I figured, what harm could it do to take a semester of biology and chemistry and volunteer at the local hospital? Well, as it turns out, a great deal of harm. From that point until I started my practice here in Eau Claire, I required 11 and a half years of training, including 3.5 years of post-baccalaureate work, 4 years of medical school, and 4 years of OBGYN residency. But the thing is, in pursuit of a calling, one must be willing to endure some hardship. And in fact, I really enjoy the process of obtaining a medical education. It's thrilling. The process changes you and gives you a unique perspective on the world. So here I am, almost 8 years in practice, and of course, still learning. Every day, the UU principles influence my choices and attitudes in my field. For example, I believe in single-payer healthcare and fight for that via the democratic process. I believe in treating patients as humans with inherent dignity and respect rather than as diagnoses, and teach that concept to my students and colleagues. And then there's the second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. There are many severely underserved communities in healthcare in the US. Practically every issue of every medical journal contains research about disparities and outcomes between, for example, white and Black Americans. I have chosen, in particular, to focus my attention on disparities and challenges faced by LGBTQ people. I found a good summary of these on the Cigna Healthcare website. LGBTQ people are at higher risk of suicide, mood disorders, eating disorders, alcohol, tobacco, and substance abuse, breast cancer, rating their health as poor, reporting chronic conditions, HPV infection, obesity, HIV, and they're less likely to have health insurance and to fill prescriptions, while at the same time being more likely to use the emergency room or delay getting care. and more likely to be refused appropriate healthcare services and to be harassed by healthcare providers. The causes of these disparities are many. A lack of clinical research on LGBTQ health-related issues, restrictive insurance benefits, limited role models, and fear due to stigma, discrimination, and institutional bias. The issue is especially troubling for transgender and non-binary people. The AMSA website reports on some extremely troubling facts. 62% of transgender people report depression. 65% report being discriminated against in a public setting in the past year. An incredible 19% of hate violence survivors are transgender. And an even more incredible 41% of transgender people have attempted suicide. It's difficult to know where to start in addressing these problems. In addition to the causes I listed above, however, there's another that can be addressed by each healthcare provider, and that is the lack of specific education and training for healthcare workers. We can seek that training out. The second principle demands our efforts in improving or eliminating these disparities and thus helps me to guide my career choices in the best direction. Over the last 2 years, I have sought additional training to safely and effectively treat transgender people with gender-affirming hormones. This has become a satisfying part of my practice, as many of my patients have been searching for years for someone willing to provide this service. I wish I could tell some of their fascinating stories, but I respect their privacy and will therefore abstain. I am lucky and blessed to have the opportunity to work in a career that really is my calling and satisfies my need to make a significant difference in the lives of those I serve. I, and we, all of us, can always do more, and I will continue to learn and seek new chances to meet the standards set by the principles. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, David. And thank you to all who have shared this morning about their passions and beliefs. Now is the time in our service where we share of our abundance with others. And each month we have a 50-50 share the plate. And for February, that has been Uniting Bridges, which is responsible for events like Juneteenth and supports the Martin Luther King Jr. annual service. And you can donate for the 50-50 share the plate or towards the general fund online at uuoclair.com or text to give at 84321. And just a reminder, as Mark said earlier, our pledge drive ends tomorrow, though of course we'll be happy to get them when they come in. And we encourage you to please enter that in online, or you can mail it or drop it off at church or just contact the office. We're so grateful for all the gifts and donations and support that make UUC great and extend our love into the world. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Please join me in saying the words for Extinguishing the Chalice by Elizabeth Selly Jones, as printed in your chat room. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Thank you for being with us on this Community Ministry Sunday. It's wonderful to be reminded that our passions go out into the world and make such a difference. And we bring our diverse views and beliefs and beauty and love and create more together. And we're going to close this time together with the words of Darcy Rourke. There is too much hardship in this world to not find joy. There is too much injustice in this world to not find the balance. There's too much pain in this world not to heal every day. Each of us ministers to a weary world. Let us go forth now and do that which calls us to make this work. Let us go forth now and do the more loving, the more compassionate, and more filled with the divinity and love and grace that is present in this world every day. For those of you watching in our Facebook live stream, I'm so glad you joined us today, and I hope you'll fill out a visitor comment if you're a visitor and come visit us again. If you'd like to get information on how to join services in Zoom, you can fill out that link. And those of you that are attending in Zoom will have a short Joys and Concerns before we break out to our coffee and breakout sessions. Thank you for joining us today. Namaste and go in peace.